welcome, dear listeners, to our episode of Eli EdTalks, the podcast where we explore the latest trends and innovations that are shaping the future of education and L&D. I'm your host, Inna, a learning strategist at Eli, and today joining our conversation is Ross Stevenson, a chief learning strategist at Still These Thoughts and a top expert in implementing AI in L&D with nearly 2 decades spent building world-class learning and performance functions for global organizations. Hi, Ross. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hey, thank you for having me. Looking forward to hopefully a lovely conversation today.
Yeah. So today is actually an unusual episode because even though adopting AI has normally very similar patterns, and we can see typical issues globally like security, lack of awareness, stakeholder management, etc., I feel that every question that I ask you, you might freely say that, hey, I've got a post on LinkedIn or I've answered that in my newsletter. So we are going to take a different approach. And in this episode, we'll try to analyze the most typical opinions, or you might even say biases or misconceptions regarding AI and L&D, and expressed by our colleagues. And hopefully we have enough time to cover all of them.
Cool. Sounds good.
Cool. So first things first, let's start our session from rapid fire question set. It's the same set of 5 questions that we ask each and every speaker of ours, and we summarize the answers by the end of the season. So first question, what book or resource can you recommend on L&D or educational topics for L&D pros who's just start or maybe in opposite who are advanced?
Good question. It's going to sound weird because I don't really read many L&D or education books, funnily enough, nowadays. One I can definitely recommend, and he has got a few, is called Out of Our Minds. And the subtitle is The Power of Being Creative by Sir Ken Robinson. Some of you might have seen on TED Talk. I think it's one of the most popular TED Talks that's available by Ken Robinson. It's called I think it's something like Education Kills Creativity. So if you've seen that talk and you're really interested in the educational system, how that affects adult learning and really L&D in corporations, and why we kind of lose that power of being creative, then yeah, highly recommend to check that one out.
Sounds cool. Who do you recommend to follow and invite to this podcast from L&D experts?
Oh, this is so hard because I talk to so many people, and I feel like if I don't say like 1,000 people, I'll get angry at me. But there's a few that come to mind, probably more recently for conversation. So Lauren Waldman, who focuses on neuroscience. Some people might know her by the moniker of the Learning Pirate on LinkedIn. Definitely one to follow and speak to. Stefan Daniels at Growth Tribe. So Growth Tribe is an excellent L&D company as well. He's the head of learning there, doing some very, very cool and interesting things. Obviously Lavinia, who we both know. So Lavinia as well from Offbeat. And then I have to also mention Kemi Timowo from Netflix. So Kenny heads up, I believe, if I'm getting this wrong, sorry, Kenny, like head of leadership and other areas at Netflix as well. So I always find conversations with Kenny very enlightening. So I would definitely encourage check out Kenny and have a conversation with him on the podcast too.
Cool, thanks. Could you share a memorable failure or setback in your L&D journey and how did you overcome that? Now, I know it's a sensitive topic, but...
Yeah, I mean, there's probably so many. And I would just say, look, failure is but it's very corny to say failure is probably the cure to getting better all the time and finding success. I think one that probably stands out specifically for me is underestimating the power of a strategic marketing plan for L&D projects. So when I was much, much younger, probably about 10, 12 years ago, I think I had the wrong mindset of just create a great product or a great project and, people will just use it because the L&D team has spent all this time doing this thing, putting it out there. And of course, people are going to use it because why wouldn't they? But that's not how life works. So we really live in an attention economy and needing to understand how do you engage people, the ways you can do that? Why does it work that way? What's the psychology around that? Because you can have the best product in the world, but it could hit the graveyard quite quickly because you've not actually thought through, well, how do I get this to people? How do I connect this with people? So I think for me, that was probably one of the biggest setbacks that not only did I learn from, but it's definitely propelled what I've done over the next decade because I got really clear on why that's important and how to use it.
Yeah, sounds cool. Okay, what question must be asked on a job interview for L&D specialists?
So my main one always was, and people that have interviewed with me would know this, because when I was head of N&D at a tech company, I had to always ask people, how are you practicing what you preach? So what I mean by that is, what are you learning now and how are you doing that? Now, the reason why I ask those questions is because we are all so focused on helping other people learn and reach their goals that we often forget about ourselves and the things that we want to do and work on. So what I always said to my team is that I want to have people in there that are always working on themselves in some way. It doesn't have to be huge or grandiose at all, but they've got that mindset of that they are practicing the things that they preach to others. So that's number one for me when I'm speaking to people in interviews.
Cool. And in terms of AI, self-education is definitely a topic I'd love to cover a bit later.
Mm,
And last question. So if you had to give just one piece of advice for
mm.
someone who just starts their career in L&D, what would that be?
Yeah, I think simply it would be don't lose your curiosity. And I
Mhm.
say that because I think after 15 years of doing this, you at times will waver in different corporate politics and different things that you have to do. And sometimes people lose that curiosity that may have first brought them into the world of L&D and particularly the role. So I'd say continue to be curious and don't be afraid to explore and experiment, because again, it's very easy to find yourself in a rut and following very robotic processes. But I think the beauty and joy out of all of this role in industry is continuing to explore and continuing to experiment to help other people do that as well. So, yeah, it sounds corny, but that would be my best advice that I continue to go back to even all these years later.
Yeah, funnily enough, I would give exactly the same advice. And if I analyze my career, every time that I had to change the rules or anything, any changes in my life would be because you feel stuck in the moment. You need to move forward.
Mm,
To move forward, you need to be curious. So let's cover the main part of our podcast. So I've got a couple of statements from my colleagues that I would love to share. And first
mm,
is regarding prompting. So, quote, prompting is a skill of the future, and those who learn it will keep their jobs. I feel that the topic of keeping your job is one
mm.
of the hottest right now. But in terms of prompting, is it really a skill of the future? What do you think?
I don't know. It's a skill of now,
Yeah.
is what I would say. I think prompting, it will evolve, right? I think we'll get to a point, no doubt, where we won't need to prompt in the way that we prompt today. So, I, prompting is just giving an instruction to a
Mhm.
database. This is basically what you do when you work with a large language model and most generative AI tools. So, if we were to go look at when ChatGPT first came out and kind of kicked off this whole generative AI renaissance back in October 2022, the way people were prompting then to the way people prompt today in April 24 is very, very different. So we can see that natural kind of evolution quite quickly. So I think it'd be hasty and probably wrong for me to say yes to that,
Mhm.
because quite honestly, because the tech moves so fast and we're already seeing a number of things with large language models where you can have pre-built prompt templates, you can have prompts built in, you can now just be even more conversational than you were once able to. In terms of the form of prompting today, I don't think it's going to be a long-term skill. I think the ability to talk to AI, however you want to look at that, I call it talking to machines, is definitely a long-term skill, but that's more about evolving how that
Mhm.
technology goes, not necessarily prompting in itself. And I mean, I think those who will learn will keep their jobs. Yeah, again, I'm not so sure. And the reason why I say that is because at the beginning of this kind of cycle, you saw these engineering jobs coming out, which were like $350,000 and all this craziness. That seems to have disappeared now. But we've seen that because at the time when the technology was so new, there was not a kind of too many people who knew how to do that and how to do it effectively. Whereas now there's kind of base education, the technology and the tools are way more smarter. They can help you. They can prompt your own prompts and help you build the structure. I mean, I see people now ask ChatGPT to say, give me a good prompt to go and ask another tool, or they use another tool to go and ask it for ChatGPT. So I think it's wise to understand the language of generative AI.
Mhm.
That's where I'd kind of land on it. I think if you don't understand how to engage and interact with generative AI tools, I think then if we put it into that context, I think it will be difficult over the next 5 to 10 years in terms of the job market reshift, if that makes sense. I think you will definitely put yourself in a better position if you spend time understanding how to engage, how to interact, and give instructions to whatever prompting looks like over the next 5 years. Because I'm pretty sure that it will end up being voice activated, or you might just give a couple of sentences and it will just do whatever it needs to do instead of the 1,000 tricks that we've got at the moment. So that would be my answer to that.
Cool. So adaptability is one of the key factors of any,
Mm,
doesn't matter prompting or not, right? So
100%.
this next statement, our company has too many security demands ever to use AI. That's my favorite, and that's the one that I face the most, I feel like.
Yeah, so I would say to that person, I don't believe it. I don't believe that's true. I think at the end of the day, like most companies we work in, it is a fundamentally, I thought, whatever way you look at it, a capitalist world, commercialism everywhere. People want to make money. Generative AI is the thing that's making people money at the moment in time. Security teams are not going to stop companies making money and getting better productivity gains, helping people, supporting them down the line. So I would honestly, I get this question too all the time. I mean, there's a couple things that sit in this for me. I think what's baked in here is natural fear, which comes from a lot of mainstream media and social media, where we see far more of the mishaps than we do of the success stories. And there's definitely good case studies out there with McKinsey and Co, BHP Mining, who've successfully implemented large language models into their organization and done very well. But we hear so less about them. We hear such much more about security leaks. I mean, there's a little bit of unbalance in terms of what really happens beneath the surface. The other component to this is I don't think a lot of the big generative AI companies right now make it really clear on how good their kind of security is and how they work with organizations. So an example of that will be most people are very familiar with the kind of brand name of ChatGPT from OpenAI. Not a lot of people know about the different tiers of ChatGPT they offer. So you get a free version, you get a paid for version, which is $20 a month, which is effectively that is all trained on the world's database. Anything you enter into it, they'll use that as training data. So, that's not secure. But if you get ChatGPT Teams or you get ChatGPT Enterprise, and many companies have enterprise tools now in this space, then they are locked down specifically to company data. It's not sending data back to OpenAI, and it's not using kind of any external source. It's not trained on other sources. Now, not a lot of people know that when I speak to them at different companies. And I think that is just one example of companies making it simpler for people to understand what are the things that are on offer around those security mechanisms. And then, of course, the last thing of that will be, for example, in Europe and US, we have a lot of security certifications like ISOs, for example, in Europe, where if you could display that, you're shown as kind of a trustworthy source. Again, that's another thing to look for and share. But I think the company having too many security demands is funny because you're probably already using AI. So generative AI is just a subset of machine learning. We're all already using machine learning. If you have an LXP in your company now with a recommendation system, you're already using AI. So AI already exists in your org, but from a generative perspective, because it is so new, because there's so many horror stories, people are put off. But again, that's about cutting through the noise. I think with yourself as an L&D team, as an example, or any area of the business, it is working with those teams to how do we cut through that noise and actually get to working with a supplier and saying, hey, ex-supplier, can you tell me more about what is your security infrastructure? That's really what you need to do. Otherwise, you'll kind of just sit there dubiously speculating if a tool you're going to bring in is going to steal all your data. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to do that if you partner with the right people and have the conversation. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel that it's extremely sensitive topic also because partially I understand the L&D specialist who just says, hey, I'm an L&D specialist. These abbreviation
Mm,
tech terms, I didn't sign up for that. I don't
yeah.
understand anything in security. How am I supposed to make
Yeah.
sense of it? But yeah, with future and just, you know, self-awareness comes, right? Okay, next one. So it's too complicated to truly understand the way AI works, and I'm still dealing with PDFs. Now, just to give the bit of a background what my colleague meant here. So I feel that there are two dimensions we live at. First dimension is one with stiff, understaffed organizations where overload is quite high and each innovation is a struggle. So PDFs and instructional manuals are still the main knowledge distribution source. And that's just because it's all what's expected from L&D. And the second one is bright and shiny, where all manual tasks are ideally distributed to AI. And I feel that the middle way would be the balance. However, that's so far, right? We've got either pessimist or radical pessimist or radical optimist. So how can the first dimension start transitioning to the second one in terms of really stiff organization and quite traditional one? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, and this is all going to be, as you say, the key word kind of very contextual in terms of where people are. I think from a personal basis, if we take out the organizational standpoint at the moment, is there's a lot that you can do to understand this. And I think the key things here is that you don't need to be an expert in how this technology works, because all of us use many different types of digital technology. But in essence, we don't really know how they work. Like we all use iPhones. Most people use iPhones as an example. We can't sit there and explain how it does what it does, but we know how to use it in the respect of the tasks that we're doing. So I think it's the same to apply to that. Is it's wise to get an understanding of what is generative AI specifically, what are the key components of that that will affect your decision making and critical thinking capabilities. So an example of that being, and this will sound very techy, so I'll try to explain this as much as possible, is that generative AI tools are probabilistic systems. So they're like probability engines. So they're basically trying to please a human user. They're trying to give a response no matter what. So when you hear about hallucinations, for example, or ghosts in the system where it's making up stuff, that's why it happens. Because you can ask the same question 20 times, you're more likely going to get a different answer 20 times because it's trying to guess what you want to hear. It's a very strange thing that happens there. And then a deterministic system is like a Google. So we've all been used to Google for so long. And it was funny because I mentioned this on a call the other day about we've had 20 years of surfacing and navigating the digital world with Google. But the way you interact with Google is completely different to the way you interact with generative AI. And also the information you get is different too. So if you were to say to Google, get me a flight from London to South Africa on this time, on this day, it's going to give you the same result pretty much 20 times out of 20 times. The plane company's not going to disappear. It's not going to change different names. The countries aren't going to change by different names. That's how that works. That's kind of what we look at as trustworthy data. But with generative AI, it's always working on, well, what have I been trained on? What are the most common responses I've been trained on? And then adding that into any online connection that I've got, how am I going to give the user the kind of best response based upon that? So there's little differences to understand that will definitely help you. So when you do work with generative AI, that you don't just take everything at face value. Now, you can do that personally. In terms of an organizational standpoint, I get it's hard because, as you say, many people are using PDFs, they're using PowerPoints, they've not really left LMSs. It's still very much an old school infrastructure. It's going to be a journey. Like, although the internet might make it out to you, everyone is using generative AI, everyone is optimizing. I can tell you now, as someone working with a lot of global companies, they are not. What they're trying to do is to understand what is this thing and how do we actually use it in a productive and progressive way? Because it's still, if we look at where we are today, a lot of the use cases that people see are still very gimmicky.
Mhm.
So for companies, they don't care about creating cute cat pictures or writing a poem for someone. What they care about is this tool going to help me with something? So I wouldn't want people to think that they need to figure all this out now and they need to move away from PDFs and PowerPoints tomorrow. We need to look at this on like a scale of it's probably going to be another 6 to 10 years until this becomes high level in most organizations. So, in terms of where you can start, a number of things. Personally, you can just start getting clear on the fundamentals of generative AI. There's loads of content out there from companies, from people like myself and others that could help you bridge that gap personally. I think that's just wise for your career. from an organizational perspective, that journey will take time. And I think the best advice I can give you there is where you can is look to, again, educate people in your organization. So stakeholders, so users of the work that you're doing on generative AI, because I think it's really going to be a useful skill overall for everyone over the next 5 to 10 years. So if you can start to sow those seeds now, and you can get to a point where, we say, well, actually, we might use a generative AI tool or use generative AI to support us in creation or facilitation of some of the work that we're doing versus the PDFs and the PowerPoints that we've got now. You can just slowly do that over time. It's most certainly not you need to change the whole way you operate tonight, and then tomorrow you need to be using this tool or that tool or that. So change takes time. And I think, unfortunately, change takes a lot more time than we think. And people do hate it when I say this, but I think it's very true, is that we grossly underestimate we grossly overestimate what we can do in 1 week, but we underestimate what we can do in a year. So there's a lot that you can do. You just have to be like, okay, well, it's not going to go away. It's not going to disappear. It's probably very much an internet moment. And it's taken us 25 years to really get to grips with the kind of digital architecture that is the internet. And we probably still haven't figured that out yet. So don't put too much pressure on yourself with that. But look, I hope that helps. There's probably a bit of everything in there, but hopefully it gives you kind of a starting point and the guidance to be, don't be scared, but do start and do a few things and scale up from there.
Yeah, baby steps. I think it's important to mention it because all over the world they say that, okay, you got a year to upskill, you got 2 years and your job will be taken, and or something like this. And I do see this huge hype around the topic on LinkedIn and everywhere, and mostly by the tools, because they say that
Mm.
they can do your job better. And it's natural to have FOMO, right? That, okay, I still don't understand
Mm.
what is Gen AI. Why am I supposed to like? So you've actually answered my next question, because in the next
Mm.
10 years, are they going to be too groundbreaking, that much that we won't be able to catch up as L&D specialists?
No, no. Well, if you ignore it for 10 years, then I think probably. I think if you're going to not engage with it whatsoever, but that's no different to as an example of when PowerPoint and Excel first came out. I mean, Microsoft PowerPoint came out in 1991. So we've had 30 plus years of this huge bit of software, and people have been picking it up at different times of their life. Now, is there a longer learning curve if you were alive when it came out and you didn't touch it until 10 years later? Yeah, there will be. Does it mean you can't learn it? No. So you'll always be able to learn it. There will just be a longer time to learn. And may that potentially restrict career opportunities in the interim? Potentially, if that job needed PowerPoint back in the 90s, or Excel is another example where finance teams were terrified that Excel was going to take all their jobs and no one was going to need finance teams again. They would all use Excel. I mean, Excel is really hard to use sometimes if you don't understand all the formulas, all the macros, all of this kind of stuff. So we have to be realistic on, yes, if you just ignore it, which I wouldn't suggest you do, it will be harder and there will be a learning curve. It doesn't mean you can't pick it up, because people can learn anything at any points in life. So what we do have right now is we're in a unique position
Mhm.
where, and definitely in my life at the moment as well, as this is probably the first huge technological innovation where I've actually been alive at the beginning of it, of a certain age, to understand it and use it. Like, I was too young for the internet in the early 90s. I was too young for other bits in that. I wasn't there at those times to be at the beginning and be an early adopter. It's such a unique time where you can be an early adopter. So you could say I was there from day one when generative AI came out, and this is how we were using it. And then in 20 years time, kids will laugh at us because they were like, really, that's what you're using it for? That seems so dumb. That'll be that bit, but you can help shape that and do it. So no, I don't think you are going to kind of miss out or have huge trouble. I just don't think really it's kind of in the benefit to ignore it, because I think there's something there that you can used to maximize or leverage some of the stuff that you're doing, why not? It's, you know, it's not going to hurt. But I think realistically, if we look at a lot of what the data says from a lot of these kind of big research houses, if I go off the work that I've been doing with companies for the last 18 months, I don't see a lot of these tools becoming, I suppose, top level in companies at the minimum for 4 or 5 years. Like, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but in terms of being adopted day to day as we adopt Microsoft Teams, Slack, all of those kind of tools, I just don't think we're there. So time is on your side, but most certainly don't wait forever. But again, the person in 10 years' time, whenever, they're going to have so many resources to help them accelerate their knowledge. So the things we know today, and it's taken us a number of years to learn, they could learn maybe in hours, maybe in minutes, who knows? But I think I can confidently say, you know, definitely don't sleep on these kind of tools and technology, because they will shape our work over the next 10 years. And we each have the unique opportunity now to help shape that and see what it looks like within organizations or personally. So I think if you can be aware of that, so it's
Yeah.
very important and very exclusive opportunity to do that, and try to get involved.
Yeah, yeah, and there are all the resources there for that. So it's
Mm.
sometimes we leave it. The next statement is about ChatGPT. So it is the best available AI. Is that true?
I don't know. I mean, that's like, I suppose again, it goes back to my thing about you know, ChatGPT is a generative AI. I think it's one of the better
Mhm.
generative AIs, but artificial intelligence is everywhere. Like I say, you know, there's machine learning in Netflix. There's recommendations in Netflix. That's great AI. But for generative AI, if we're specific there, yeah, ChatGPT is definitely one of the best available. There's other great ones. Perplexity is a great large language model. Um, Claude Opus, the paid version, is also a great large language model. But again, a large language model is just one part of generative AI. You know, we've got text to video, we've got text to image, we've got videos to videos coming soon, all of this kind of stuff. So you know, ChatGPT as an all-rounder, if you're looking for an all-round tool that's going to get you good results, then yeah, it's definitely going to be one of the best out there. But again, it's only the best based on the tasks and the problems you're trying to solve. And just because the market in social media says ChatGPT is king, it may be king for some people, but actually you might find a large language model, or you might find another generative AI model that's just actually way more beneficial for the specific work that you do. So the reason why I mention a company called Perplexity example is I do a lot of research. I work on a lot of reports with companies. I do that for my own work. And I find that far superior than ChatGPT in terms of research and analysis and reporting. So again, it comes back to, what are the things that you're trying to solve? What are the tasks that you're doing? And then if generative artificial intelligence is going to help that, select the best tool out of that family for you. So, you know, and ChatGPT may be that, it may not be that. So yeah, that'd be the best. But I mean, there's always those things out there, right? Every single week I see ChatGPT killer or Microsoft Copilot killer. So yeah, I'm sure the internet would disagree with me on that. But yeah, try it out for yourself. See what you think.
Yeah, it's an ungrateful task to choose the best one. Uh,
Mm.
so in terms of language models, there is one statement which says that the European Union will eventually ban AI. For instance, Bard is banned in Canada. So what do you think?
I don't know. I don't think they will. I don't think they will, purely from a commercialistic standpoint of there is just too much money. And I think big companies are now adopting these technologies. I would never say they won't stop it, but I feel like we are too far down the yellow brick road now to try and unweave all this. I think it's very similar if we look at this as with social media, where social media, I think as a society, we made many mistakes
Yep.
in the technology growing too quickly. And we are very much paying for that now as a society. And we're trying to untangle that. Whether we're doing a good job of that, I don't know particularly. There's many different kind of facets to that. And I think I see this as a very similar journey to that, where regulation has been very late. And I understand it's very difficult because the technology moves so fast, and I just don't think they'll ban it. I think there'd be too much lobbying from a political standpoint. There's too much money invested now. I think we're at a point where there might be temporary bans, there might be certain restrictions. I 100% believe there should be stronger regulation, no doubt, in who can build these tools and what data they're using. But I think outright ban is, yeah, it's too late now, and I think it would put um, European Union companies at a disadvantage if they did do that. So I don't see that happening personally.
Yeah, interesting. Well, last but not the least, I think it's my favorite one so far. So I do see
Mm.
the benefits in terms of content creation. However, AI can't be beneficial in other areas. So I know you've got some posts on that, but yeah.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, content creation is the least great thing about generative AI. And again, people will disagree with me there but it always looks at what is your context? What are you using it for specifically? So, I mean, as you mentioned, I've got loads of free videos and content out online where I actually don't use it for content creation. So I love to write. I do a lot of writing. That's what I do, is kind of my job, and writing about L&D things. And for me, it's incredibly hard to train any large language model to kind of think like me and write the way I write. I don't want it to, because that's a uniquely human thing that I do. So I want to do that. Where I find great benefits with a lot of large language models is in being a thought partner. So, and the reason why I find this quite helpful is that there's a lot of L&D teams that aren't really a team. They're just one person, and they're looking after L&D in an organization. And the ability to engage with what I look at as a digital intern, and just to ask questions or maybe brainstorm ideas or get different points of view on some work that you're doing, and challenging your views on stuff is incredibly beneficial, and even helping you to break down complex topics, explaining things in an organization that you might not understand. Just that thought partnership thing, I think, is just so beneficial. And I think we see that across the board, actually, in most industries where, many of these research houses that go out and do all this analysis, I think what they see come back time and time again is people just saying, like, the ability to just converse with something else and get these different perspectives is fantastic. And I mentioned some of the components there where, helping you to analyze big reports at scale. I am a guy that spends every single week, I go through a report which is probably somewhere in the region of 50 to 100 pages long. As a human, that's impossible for me to do page by page. So generative AI has been a great enhancer for me in the fact that I can now summarize reports. I can then fundamentally talk to reports through the large language model and say, these are the 5 to 10 things that I think are really interesting about this report from my kind of quick read. Are there any things that I'm missing for this audience that are in this report? And I can use these tools to help kind of shore up my understanding of the data that's in those reports, but also make sure that I'm not missing anything. And the same standpoint, we were joking about Excel earlier on. I'm not an Excel whiz. I'm not sitting here creating VLOOKUPs and all this other stuff because it's not part of my job
Yeah.
24/7. But I've seen some great stuff already with a lot of these large language models where if I need to do something, there's a learning curve. I've just been so impressed in saying, here's what I'm trying to do. And to be honest, if you saw what I'm saying to the tool, like how it can interpret what I'm trying to do is amazing. But it does. It interprets the kind of um like brain vomit that I'm giving it and saying, oh, I need to do this. I need to do it this way. It needs to look like this. And this is a tool that I'm using. And I'm just amazed again and again on 10 seconds. This is exactly how to do it. Now,
Yeah.
that for me is personalized learning in the flow of work at its peak, at its best.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, there's so many use cases beyond content creation. I think if you're looking at it just for content creation, you are basically using less than 5% of what's capable. So again, I would encourage people to go out there, experiment, take a look. There's so many different ways that you can use it.
Yeah. Well, from my background, I did face the companies that, PDFs and, this kind of content. So from my perspective, for those companies, AI is utilized 90% for content creation, and it
Mm,
should be.
mm,
It's a great base to start. However, well, English is my second language, so obviously I double check everything with AI. But if I check my LinkedIn post that I wrote through ChatGPT, I think, oh my God, there is no way I'm ever posting this. This is horrible. It's 100% clear it's robotic. So I guess balance, like in everything in life, right? With
100%.
yeah. So with that, all my statements for today are answered. Thank you for that. And every time for me personally, the conclusion is the middle way. So
Yeah, I agree that I think so. I put out an image, I can't remember. It was probably a tongue-in-cheek thing where I had like on one side it was becoming a member of an AI cult, and on the other side it was like an ostrich putting their head into the sand. And you want balance. And I completely agree. You want to be in the middle. And if it's helpful, there is, and I can send this to you afterwards, there's a report from, of many reports from Boston Consulting Group. I believe the report is called AI at Work from last year. And what that demonstrated was that people who have a base understanding of generative AI or the fundamentals had a far more balanced view. They have this beautiful chart. And again, I'll send that to you, where what they saw was that the most optimistic people were the people that actually tried the tools, the least optimistic and the ones that believed in negativity and were quite naysayers towards the tools had never used them.
yeah.
Never registered for them, never used them. So what it kind of showed is that you'll definitely get a more balanced view if you are able just to learn a little bit and just be in the middle. You don't have to be in the cult of AI, but you also don't have to be, AI is going to destroy our world. But that's where, again, the beauty of what we're talking about is education. You get a little bit of education, it is just going to help you understand where you are in this system of stuff right now.
Yeah. Just summing things up, if you could say what is the next step that you would like for our listeners to do the moment they stop listening to our episode. So what can they do for starters? Because this episode was mainly based on the pre-assumptions, right, and statements of those who haven't started their journey of AI. So what's the next step for them?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to do is just spend half an hour going to learn the fundamentals of generative AI. If there is nothing else that you do, and you can get this everywhere. I mean, you can even ask ChatGPT to give you the fundamentals of generative AI, and it will do that. Once you have done that, if you've never used a large language model, and so by a large language model, I mean conversational AI tools like ChatGPT, like Claude, like Microsoft Copilot, go try one out. There's a bunch of free versions. There's no harm in doing that. So those are two actions you could take immediately. Get a little bit clearer on what generative AI is, what it means for you, and go and experiment. The beauty of a lot of this is doing. And there's a very popular professor on LinkedIn, which I'm sure many people have probably heard of at this point, Ethan Mollick, who just released his own book as well on working with artificial intelligence. I mean, he had a really great quote where, and he works with a lot of his students, I believe it's at Stanford over the last year, where what they found is that people get a really great understanding of limitations and opportunities after about 5 to 10 hours in the ecosystem of these tools. So that would be something you can do later on. But first off, two things: learn a little bit about generative AI. And like I say, you're more than welcome to stalk me on LinkedIn or anywhere and get that free stuff and find it. Find it from anywhere that's available. There's IBM, there's loads of reputable sources that are doing this stuff. Go and sign up for a tool, play around with it, and then just keep experimenting. So it sounds simple, but learn by doing. That's what we do as humans, right? We learn by doing. So just go and do it.
Yeah, and coming back to your statement that how do you practice what you preach? So
100%. Yeah, you got to do it.
yeah. Okay, so with this, it's time to sum up our episode. Thank you for tuning in to EdTalks. Today we tackled most common biases surrounding AI and L&D with Ross Stevenson. And from job security concerns to complexity fears, we've explored it all. But amidst these biases lie opportunities for growth, and transitioning into AI-driven solutions may seem daunting, but the future is now, and education and awareness are the key. So thank you again, Ross, for the insights, and until the next time, everyone.